Welcome and thank you for coming to the Hot Topics presentations by Florida American Institute of Architects Association. I'm going to be talking about the best kept secret in Florida right now, which is House Bill 837 or Florida Statute 786.0701, subcolon section C, whatever. This is about a bill that was passed in March of 23 regarding security and crime prevention through environmental design features in residential multifamily housing. The learning objectives for our session today is to illustrate how we can integrate functional security design and enhance the building and add real value, discuss the best practices for security camera systems, lighting and parking lots, common area spaces, door locking systems, and locking devices for windows and gates, and to familiarize architects on designing in the required security devices and measures to comply with the new bill so that you don't get ambushed later by a disgruntled owner or property management company. Security means different things to different people because I'm in the business of designing security in the buildings and designing high security buildings. To me, anti-terrorism design and security and dealing with all the horrible things that happen in the world is, to me, a warm, fuzzy puppy. But when you talk security to most people, it's this horrible beast that, oh my God, you're going to make my facility look like a jail or prison. But I resent that because I design jails and prisons and they win design awards, and they have to be safe environments for the staff to work there and inmates to live there. So security is an important item that is now becoming officially a state required design criteria. When people get attacked or assaulted or robbed, it becomes a life-changing event in their existences, and people then act with fear and they're afraid, and it becomes a very challenging issue of how do we reassure people that they can live in a safe environment or work in a safe environment or go to school safely. So what's in the new law? That the owner or operator of a multifamily residential property which substantially implements these security measures for that property has a presumption against liability regarding criminal acts that are committed by third parties who are not employees or agents of the owner operator. Bottom line, if you comply with this state law requirements, and there's three parts of it, which we'll talk about in a minute, you get a get out of jail free card with the courts or a hall pass that if you get sued for someone getting mugged in the parking lot or assaulted in their apartments or shot or raped or whatever, and you show that you met a reasonable standard of care, the courts will issue a summary judgment and not hold that owner or property manager responsible or liable. The sponsors of this horribly written bill was Representative Tom Fabricio and Representative Tommy Gregory. These two individuals, which is the nicest word I can use, came out with this law without consulting any subject matter experts. They didn't consult their own Florida Attorney General's office, Florida Crime Prevention Institute. They didn't consult myself as the leading expert in the world in crime prevention through environmental design and also a trainer in CPTED. They didn't consult Art Hutchins, who is one of their instructors and has his own CPTED empire, the National Institute of Crime Prevention. They did nothing. I mean, they most likely had some aide came up with some words and writings and numbers that make no sense, that are in violation of other sections of the Florida Building Code or local zoning ordinances. There is more questions than answers in this bill. And every time I'm asked a question, I'm embarrassed to say most of the time, I don't know. And so what it's becoming is we're doing the best we can with a very poorly, vague, unclear bill, and it'll be ultimately tested in the courts. And just as sort of a side note here before I jump into this full time, I want you to know that I lobbied hard against this bill to what they call fix the glitches. I worked with the Florida Association of American Institute of Architects and the Florida Apartment Association, and they hired the best lobbyist in Tallahassee. And pretty much we were told we were pounding sand. They weren't going to open up the bill, because if they open up the bill, then all the plaintiff attorneys are going to come in there and try and tweak it and water it down. And they just said, shut up and dance, live with it. So this is what it is. And even though I was on a panel with these putzes to try and go over about how to make this better and make it, code compliant and congruent with industry standards. They didn't know, they didn't care, and they're not doing anything about it. And as a result, we're living in this kind of environment where you see the billboards and the Morgan & Morgan commercials every night about, who can I sue? And if someone gets hurt in a property, people don't accept any personal responsibility anymore. So it's, who's going to pay me for my pain and suffering? And the elements of a premises security negligence lawsuit is the victim must have suffered a loss, must prove that the defendant had a duty owed to provide security, prove that the defendant breached that duty, and prove that the breach of duty was the cause and fact of the injury or loss. And we're seeing article after article in the paper about, when there are huge lawsuits as a result of people getting hurt or killed in apartment complexes. Here in this particular article, a young lady was at the Maya, which ultimately resulted in legislation known as Maya's Law. She had just moved into an apartment in Orlando. She was going to the University of Central Florida, and she was found dead when one of the maintenance workers came in with a key and raped and murdered her. And then he killed himself. Now the residents of the complex are demanding safety and security improvements in light of the tragedy, which calls for the apartment complex negligent for allowing security concerns to persist and responsible for the girl's disappearance. The investigators learned the maintenance man at the apartment complex entered her apartment with a master key minutes before she was last seen alive. The residents took their list of demands of the complex management on Saturday, asking for improvements, including a security officer at the gated entrance, 24/7, security presence, improved lighting of surveillance cameras, overhaul maintenance practices, elimination of all master keys. Bottom line, the next year, this was passed into a state law called Maya's Law, and that was sort of the precursor of passing this House Bill 837 law, which now takes and goes into more detail on what are the actual requirements of security for an apartment complex and what else is involved in complying with the state law. And architecture does play a role in security, as this Gay and Wilson cartoon succinctly points out. It's certainly high time you got around to fixing that lock, Strauss, and the poor guy, died in the bathroom because he was trapped in the stall. There's consequences for when things break or are not kept in good working order. And this law involves locks and hardware and lighting and cameras. And we're going to go into all the deep detail of that. So before I go into the 7 deadly sins, or what I call these 7 requirements that are part of the security aspect, the law goes into 3 aspects. They want compliance with 7 security components, which I'm going to go through in a moment here. They require a crime prevention through environmental design, survey analysis by a qualified CPTED practitioner, and they require training of the staff in the security and CPTED features for that apartment complex. So now we go back into what are the 7 deadly sins, what are the 7 items that are being required by this House law that are a must do. First, the video surveillance systems at the property and building points of entry and exit points and have that data retrievable for at least a month. Lighting the parking lots, and these are open ground level parking lots at 1.8-foot candles at 18 inches above the finished floor from dusk to dawn. Lighting in the common area spaces controlled by photocell or similar electronic devices. Resident apartment doors shall have a 1-inch throw deadbolt lock. That the resident door shall have a peephole or door viewer or have a side light or view panel next to the door so you can see who's knocking at the door. 6, there should be a locking device on each window, exterior sliding glass door, not used for community purposes. And it doesn't matter if it's a 2-story building or a 200-story building, every window and every sliding patio door, even if you're on the 25th floor, has to have locking devices on it. And 7, locked gates with a key or fob access along pool fence areas. And we'll go into a deeper dive on that. So some of these issues, they make common sense. On the other hand, they're written poorly and there's more questions. And of course, the properties must be in compliance, by January 1st, 2025, a mere 2 months from now. So this section, the law, which is now 768.0706, further requires that the owner, principal operator of the property to have crime prevention through environmental design assessment that is no more than 3 years old, completed and documented by a law enforcement agency or a Florida crime prevention through environmental design practitioner. And all this is done by the new year, and for the owner or property manager to provide proper crime deterrence and safety training to its current employees. After January 1, the owner or principal operator must provide such training to all employees within 60 days after hire. So now we're going to go into a deep dive on the 7 required items, and then if we have time, we'll go talk a little bit about CPTED and the training. But the important thing is that I get requests from architects to be their security consultant or CPTED consultant when they're doing work in Pompano Beach or for one of the HUD agencies or Miami-Dade Housing Authority, whatever, that more and more agencies are requiring a CPTED review or a CPTED plan, crime prevention through environmental design, as part of the submission of the drawings to be approved by the design review committees or councils. So it's important to provide a reasonable level of security. These are the 7 items now that are absolutely required as part of compliance with the new law starting in the new year. And they do have a design impact because now the architects are required to show that they're providing these locking systems, surveillance systems, and other features. So security camera systems need to be at the points of entry and exits, except they never define what entry and exits are. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Cameras need to record and maintain the data is retrievable for at least 30 days. Video footage is there to assist offender identification and apprehension. But we have to ask the questions, what kind of video cameras does your property use or need? Where are they located? What are they watching? How do you retrieve the footage from them? And these are all important security questions, but not typically on the realm of what most architects would be looking at or considering. And finally, how do you contact somebody if there is an issue to be reported, that you observe someone breaking into the parking lot at night or someone skulking around in the back of the buildings, peeping into buildings and units and such. So here's an example. Here's a property that I looked at that is, a series of buildings, apartment buildings, and some community area space and open parking lots. And what I did, these purple triangles are just showing you the view of the entrances at the ends of the building and at the main lobby foyer. And because it's an open parking lot and because there really wasn't the ability to do fencing around the property because it was part of a large commercial complex, so there was some cameras to watch the overall areas of the parking, as well as the common area spaces like the dog walk area and the pool and a park and things of that nature. Another example might be what I'm giving as my best educated interpretation of this law is that they want cameras at the entrances and exits. And that typically now in today's world includes license plate readers, LPRs. So I have a license plate reader, people going out, people coming in, cameras to watch people coming in, cameras to watch pedestrians coming in. And then the other couple cameras are just at the main entrances because the building shell itself serves as the perimeter protection, but there's gaps between the buildings that we need to have cameras to watch who's coming and going onto the property, unless we start putting fences or gates, between the buildings to create a uniform perimeter. And if you do have cameras, maintenance matters. This is just at a recent training I went to, and here you have this camera where the casing is open. So now you're just making bouillabaisse with all the water and mosquitoes coming in there. So clearly this is, how long had it been sitting there before I was able to take this picture? License plate readers. This is technology has been around for a while, but now it's compressed, it's tight, it's not very expensive, and it, has a different look and feel than a typical normal video camera system. But this, like on the turnpike, is able to record your license plates at a fast rate of speed and log it in so that you now have prima facie evidence of people coming into the property and or leaving the property. On the other hand, if you do have camera systems, you need to make sure they're installed professionally. You just can't be dropping them on a shelf with wires dangling like this. This is not okay or professional or reasonable. Or using your iPhone as the video camera system. No, this is not okay or acceptable. And video does have a place. Unfortunately, yes, it is becoming an imposition, and we're having now living in George Orwell's world of 1984. Wherever we go, we're under camera surveillance. But this is also being used as a tool to apprehend criminals and people behaving badly. At the Safe Havens Estates, a really, really gated community. And you see all the cameras and the guards and the fencing and the helicopters and the guard towers, and people are just scared. Well, welcome to our world in 2024, 25. But video does have a value. For example, this article showed that video shows burglar breaking into unlocked cars in this gated community. And there's been a bunch of properties in Palm Beach where these malevolent juveniles come in there and they slash 40, 50 cars, tires, and break their windows. They don't even steal stuff. They're just being hateful because they're teenagers. Our number 2 item in our top 7 deadly sins list is lighting in parking lots. And again, I want to make sure we're clear that this is regarding ground level open parking lots. This is not addressing parking garages, which I'll talk about in a second. So why is proper lighting so important? Because 90% of all crime occurs after dark. That is especially related to person-to-person crime. Parking lots and garages account for the single greatest location of crime that results in premises security negligence lawsuits. So that's why it's so important to have ground floor protection in the garages, to have a ground boundary definitions of the open parking lots, good lighting, video surveillance cameras. There's a lot of basic security features that will improve the basic security in parking facilities. In fact, parking lots are so well known to be problem areas that they even make movies about it, like P2, A New Level of Fear. The only thing more terrifying than being alone is discovering you're not. And so here you have some woman who's terrified as she's being pursued by someone stalking her in a garage. And how many movies can you think of that you've seen that scene in the movie where the person is attacked or assaulted in the garage? And garages are scary places, and so are parking lots. So that's why it is an important design and operational consideration about how we do the circulation patterns and the boundary definition and the surveillance and the access control into garage and parking facilities. So the law asks for in open parking lots that the intensity of at least an average of 1.8 foot candles per square foot at 18 inches above the surface from dusk to dawn, or controlled by a photocell or similar electronic device that provides light from dusk to dawn. That there's lighting in the common area spaces, such as porches, laundry rooms, bike rack areas, playgrounds. And this must be illuminated from dusk to dawn, controlled by a photocell. But what it doesn't do in the law is give you a minimum foot candles. So now common area spaces fall under standards of care, which would either be zoning regulations like Miami-Dade County zoning has a 1 foot candle minimum for sidewalks and parking areas and things of that nature, and or the Illumination Engineering Society standards for security that I'm going to show you in just a second. And it's important to, if there are lights that are not working, that we must be able to have a system to notify management. So what I've been suggesting in the CPTED world is that you put like a QSR code or a number on the light pole or the light fixture, so that if it is out, as security's walking around or residents walking around, they can call management and say, hey, I just saw light number 25 that's burnt out. It got struck by lightning, or it got burnt out, or whatever, fix it. And here's a great example of good lighting in an open ground level parking lot using LED lights, sparkling white light, a uniform level of light in the ground, high canopy trees, so there's no hiding spots here, perimeter fencing to provide some boundary definition. It's clear, it's clean, and it provides the ability for people to see where they're going, and for the video surveillance cameras to be able to keep an eye on what's happening in the parking lot. What to look for. The intensity of at least an average minimum of 1.8 foot candles. We just talked about this, controlled by some kind of photocell or electronic device. And when you have shrubbery in parking lots, it's important. This is a CPTED standard, not a state required standard, that you prune the trees, tree canopies up above 8 feet and the bushes and ground cover below 32 inches. So that if you come up to a parking lot, even though there's a bright light here, with these big high bushes here, you can hide the entire marching band back here, and you'd never know it if someone was hiding here or camping out here and they jump out at you and get you at your car. So this should be all pruned at about under 2.5 to 3 feet. The benefits of whitewashing in garages. So now as we talk about garages, the state requirement doesn't address what the lighting should be in garages. So that falls under the Illumination Engineering Society G-1-22 publications for garages, which is between 3 to 5 foot candles. But one of the things architecturally we can do to make garages much better in having better lighting is by painting the ceiling white, the Huck Finn whitewashing of the fence. And you can literally see the refraction of the light on the ground on the gray concrete is dramatically different where it's reflected with a white ceiling versus the dark gray of the concrete where it's dark and darker. A beautifully painted garage is an amazing thing. It really is bright, it's clean. It eliminates hiding spots and dark areas that people can sort of be stealth and ambush somebody. And good lighting even on the pathway travels. This is just LED lights embedded inside of the railings here. Creates a beautiful experience of this exterior stairway, which might otherwise be sort of scary at night, but now with the occasional pedestrian light and this railing lighting, it's a uniform, clean level that I can see 100 feet away if there's people walking up here and they can see me. So it eliminates the opportunities for ambush or hiding. Light pollution versus light trespass, another consideration for specifying lighting. And again, architects usually defer lighting to a lighting engineer. Our job as master planners and as architects is to make sure that what the lighting engineer is doing, that they're aware that they have to comply with this new state law. Because here at this Burger King, you have a security guard here and you have lots of great lighting, but that light is cut off literally that it doesn't trespass onto the adjoining property or into the street. This prevents sky glow from the light going up and light trespass into other properties. This is especially relevant in apartment multifamily housing world because you don't want glare, you don't want the light going up in the sky and sky glow, and you want the ability of the light going down so it helps people see where they're walking or driving or parking.
Now, Mama, I know you like the new security system.
It's lovely.
Watch this. Check this out. Oh, nice. Pretty impressive, right?
It looks like a ball field.
So our goal is not to light up the properties like a nuclear flash, but to light up enough so that you can see movement and shape and people so that you're not surprised, and more importantly, that you're not ambushed. Because lighting doesn't stop crime. It provides the opportunity to see, but it can be the opportunity of the predator to see the victim or the victim to see the predator. One of the beautiful things about the new LED lights is the fact that it can be put on timers. It has, very specific design cutoffs, so it puts the light exactly where you want it. And you can add motion sensors to it. So in parking lots, like in shopping centers, if the shopping mall closes at 9 o'clock, the lights cut off at 10 o'clock. If there's a car that goes through the parking lot or someone walking through the parking lot, boom, the lights pop back on. And then in 5-10 minutes, they power back down. So I'm not using the electricity to light up an asphalt parking lot or concrete parking lot when there's nobody using it. And here's a good example of where they've taken a wall pack and added the shielding so that the light is being sent downwards and not upwards, glare, or someplace that you don't want the light to go, and it's light trespass. And when we design lighting, we have to be considerate of the poor people that have to get up there and change the light bulbs. And of course, the beauty of LED light bulbs is that they will outlive us. They last anywhere from 10 to 20 years, depending on whether it's an 8-hour-a-day use or a 24-hour-a-day use. But someone's got to go step up on this ladder to change that bulb. If it's an incandescent or fluorescent bulb, it might last 6 months or a year. When you put an LED bulb in there, you never have to change it again. And we also need to be mindful about where the lighting interacts with landscaping and plantings. So here at this apartment or office building or school, you have video cameras watching the side, and you've got this wonderful wall pack here, and they just planted this, low ground cover and a nice little fir tree here. But in Florida's climate, in 6 months, all of a sudden that becomes a giant, a Christmas tree for Rockefeller Center, and you can hide the entire FAMU marching band behind there. So now I've muted the effect of the lighting, and the camera can't see what's going on. And this provides an ambush opportunity or an opportunity for a homeless person to camp out because no one can see them. If we do have lighting and we haven't coordinated with the landscape architect where the lights and the trees are growing, you have very expensive tree lighting. And this is a problem. So now it requires maintenance and pruning of the trees, but ideally you should be considering the impact of where a tree trunk is going to be, and then having, the light pole 10, 12 feet away so that the tree can grow up unimpeded by the impact of the lighting. And of course, the light should not be on during the day. That's where your photocell and timers come in. Our number 3 in our top 7 list, lighting, what to look for. We want common area spaces such as walkways, laundry rooms, porches, bike rack areas, playgrounds, must be illuminated from dusk to dawn using a photocell or electronic device. And they don't specify the specific foot candles, so now that would defer to the national standards as a guide, the Illumination Engineering Society G-1-22, which is the most current security lighting guidelines. And it looks like this, and it can be purchased from the Illumination Engineering Society. It's, I don't know, 50, 75 bucks, but this now provides a standard of care for garages and shopping malls and apartment complexes and sidewalks and government buildings and ATMs and things of that nature. Porch lighting. Back in the day, we would have an incandescent bulb in a porch light, and most of the time the porch lights would not be turned on because they weren't wired in series and people felt they were paying for electricity, so they wouldn't turn the porch lights on. But now the LED lights have a little a photo sensor in there, and so they'll turn on and off automatically. It uses 1/10 of the electricity of an incandescent bulb. And in the CPTED world, not part of the 7 deadly sin requirements, the porch lights, both front and back porch, should be wired in series so that when the sun goes down, all of the porch lights go on, front and back. This gives a wonderful perception that people are there, they're living in their buildings, that they can see you, and that it's not, light, dark, and you don't, if the lights aren't on, then you don't know if the people are home or not. When the lights are on, it creates a whole different perception of safety. Also, when you have lighting, it's really important, again, under a CPTED perspective here, that the lighting illuminate the building sign. This is building 14, and I can see absolutely clearly and effortlessly which apartment units are in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd floor. So we need to have good color contrast, good size, but also these building numbers should be illuminated as a CPTED requirement, which is sort of the second part of the second phase of this state law, to have a CPTED study to cover all the things not covered in the 7 deadly sins requirements. Here's an example of a wall pack with LEDs. It's shielded, so it's going down, and very energy efficient, and will outlive us. We need to have pedestrian level lighting as well for the sidewalks, or what they are referring to in the law as the common area spaces. And these also now have evolved into LED lamps and will last forever and provide a beautiful, bright white light. So that the experience you have when you're walking around the sidewalk is a nice uniform level of lighting. Even though it's pedestrian level lighting, I want to be able to see shape, movement, and determine if someone's walking around, whether they are stranger or foe, or a friend. And again, here in an apartment complex where low ground cover, high canopy trees, some common area spaces, and the sidewalk path I can see all the way to the beginning to the end. LED lights are truly a revolution in lighting that's been around for about the last 15 to 18 years. And now the prices have gotten very reasonable and comparable to mercury vapor and high pressure sodium lamps. And they can be put on timers, they can be dimmed, they can, have cutoffs. And here we're using the light pole not only to put the cameras on and your microwave or for Wi-Fi signals, but now your LED lights on the buildings and on the side. Again, we want, it is required by law that there's lighting on the entryways and on the buildings. So the entrances should be lit, so it's absolutely clear where you're going. And again, an open parking lot, 1.8-foot candles, 18 inches above the ground. And in common area spaces like the laundry rooms. Now, one of the things that should be mentioned here is that the lightings can be on a switch, but what the experience we would like in the CPTED world is that there's an automatic motion activated sensor. So if someone is in the laundry room, it automatically gets activated. So someone can't, a woman comes in here doing the laundry with kids, and now someone turns the light off and now they're attacked or ambushed and it's dark in the room. This way, the automatic motion sensor activated light removes that excuse and provides the ability for good uniform level of lighting. As compared to, this would be an example of negligent maintenance and poor lighting, because if you happen to have your car here and you're walking to your car, whether it be day or night, doesn't matter because it's a garage, it's a turtle shell. Now, and you get attacked, why wasn't this light working? Why isn't there light over here? So if you build it, they will come. And so if you build these attractive magnets for crime, like parking lots and garages, they must be well lit and illuminated to meet local codes, standards, and of course now our new state law. The consequences of not having good lighting is, like, for example, here at the buttress, the butt walls of the apartment buildings, this becomes totally dark here, and we still got some light because of sunset, but there should be some wall packs and some fencing between the buildings here so that people can't trespass behind the buildings, and that these dead end spaces have illumination. The good news is they have some windows here, so if there's some activity, you can at least see out the side. But more often than not that I see, the end walls here don't have windows, they don't have lighting, they don't have fencing, and these become the attractive magnets for criminal activity. And if you have lights, they need to be working. Number 4, all exterior doors must have a 1-inch throw deadbolt lock. That's the good news, and we've known about this requirement for 5 decades or so. However, what the law doesn't address is the strike plate, what the deadbolt actually goes into, and that these screws that come with a typical Medico deadbolt lock are 1/2-inch screws, 3/4-inch screws, and if it's going into a wood frame, that is not nearly enough. The industry standard for the strike plate screws that holds the deadbolt into the strike plate should be a minimum, it should be 3 inches. You might be able to get away with 2.5 inches. Where things get iffy is what happens if it's a concrete wall. Because the strike plate is being held in a 1/2-inch piece of soft pine wood, if it's a wood door and a wood frame. Now, if this is a hollow metal door and this is going into a hollow metal door frame, I don't need to have a 3-inch screw, but I just went to a property that had a 3/8 of an inch screw. It was like just a click over a 1/4 inch. And if you give this a good kick, even on a metal door frame, that's going to the screws are going to shear and get pulled out. So I recommend, if it's a hollow metal door frame, that they should be at least 1-inch metal screws going in there. With 1 inch, that's going to hold it pretty good. If it's wood, we need 3 inches. Again, the law requires a locking device required for windows, sliding doors, and doors not used for community purposes. So we'll talk about the window locks in just a second, but again, here's just a good example of the deadbolt locks, and whether it be a thumb turn or a mechanical latch, that deadbolt lock needs to get into the strike plate, into the door frame. But what's holding the lock is the door frame. And if this is a wood frame and we're seeing that the frames are split, that's problematic. Likewise here, where you see the door frames are split, one good kick and all this is just going to shatter and splinter like you see in the movies and on the TV shows. Again, and where the strike plates are not put in properly and the door frames are cracked. So if it's hollow metal, that's great, but we don't have the luxury. Sometimes we do use wood frames and wood doors. Again, you can see the cracks in the door frame and that this is only a half-inch screw. So if you kick this, even though it's not going to withstand the force of someone trying to do a burglary or a forced entry. This is from the movie Unhinged by a very overweight Russell Crowe. And you can see how easily that door just shattered and that whole frame just gave way with just one good kick. So strike plate screws matter because this is the screw that comes with the lock set, but this is the screw we need to put in there because this will go through the door jamb and into the door frame. And now you've got some substantial structure holding the door and the lock in place. The consequences of not is that you have basically kicked out door frames and the wood just can't handle the pressure at that point. Even with hollow metal door frames, it looks like, oh, it's good, a metal door frame and a nice looking screw. When I took out the screw, it was 3/8 of an inch. And it wouldn't, if Russell Crowe kicked that door, it would just shear the metal on this little tiny screw and the door would kick open. We need to have that door strong enough to withstand, 3 or 4 good kicks so that the person inside has enough time to A, call 911, call the police, B, do house protection by Smith & Wesson. If you don't have that and the door just splinters open like you saw in the movie clip, you're just totally caught by surprise and you don't have enough time to react accordingly. Number 5, peepholes in doors. The goal here being that I need to see who's knocking. Hello, Candygram, Land Shark, who's at the door and can you see them well? So we have to comply with building code requirements about the height of the peephole. You might have to have a secondary peephole if it's a house or an apartment with an ADA requirement, someone in a wheelchair, but that peephole should have a good view so you can see far enough that you're not going to be surprised or ambushed if you open up the door. And whether you have a peephole, you might also have a side view panel. So this is, in the CPTED universe, exactly the experience I'm looking for. I want the window to be no wider than 4 inches because in jail and prison world, that's the critical dimension of a human head that you can't crawl through, even if you can break out the glass. And from human factors and ergonomics, if I break through and I reach through the most my hand is going to go is 22 inches, I can't reach the deadbolt lock to open up the door. But architects don't think about this because they never, really gave much thought about forced entry and burglaries. Again, another example of the glass being far away from the door handle on the far side. I can still see who's out here, but if I have that view panel right adjacent to the door handle, it facilitates burglary. If you have exterior exposed hinge pins, these should be non-removable. Otherwise, someone can come in there with a screwdriver, go pop, 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 and you're inside that door in about 10 seconds. On the other hand, if here's a window sill next to the door lock, and again, I can break the glass and start trying to open up the door. Again, another window view panel next to the door lock where I can break through easily and get access to the door handle and the lock. Number 6, if you have windows and or sliding glass doors, they must have a locking device and if it's not used for community purposes. So we have the typical turn screw or latch or thumb latch, like a sash lock that will secure the windows. Typically, we would use this in CPTED rule on the ground floor, so you can't prop open the windows and burglarize the apartment break-in. And we've seen articles, open window leads rapist to elderly victim. She moved to her window and found a screen missing, later found it on the ground floor, leading her and police to believe Evans came in through the window. Locking devices for windows. Typical thumb latch. This works just fine. And what the law calls for is the lock. What the law doesn't call for is a ventilation lock. And so what who cares is that It's one thing if I lock the window, but if in our, half a dozen nice weather days a year here in Florida, and I want to open up my sliding glass door to let some fresh air in, or my window, I want to be able to put a ventilation lock that goes into the track that I can open up my window 4 inches, again, not greater than 4 inches, so someone can't crawl in. And now I let the fresh air in, but I have not invited or promoted or allowed someone to walk in the sliding glass door of the window to burglar or assault somebody inside the apartment. So here's an example of sliding glass doors. And while there's a built-in lock and latch here, we've seen where there's sometimes people put like a pole on the bottom here, or there's a secondary latch down here, or there's a pin that goes through the two doors. And the sliding glass door has a latch that secures it, that goes into a locking device on the door frame. Also, we see if you don't have that kind of device on the sliding glass door, that you design in or specify a Charlie bar that prevents someone from opening up the door. The beauty of our new hurricane-resistant sliding glass doors is that it has the 4-inch track to prevent wind-driven rain to go through. And so you can't lift the door off the track anymore like we could with the older style sliding glass doors. Lock gates, number 7. If you have a pool gate, you must have a key or fob access, which essentially is access control. Now, the interesting aspect of this requirement is the fact this violates Florida Building Code. We've known for decades that the Florida Building Code has a requirement under the section for swimming pools that you have that latch that's like about, anywhere from 48 to 52 inches off the ground, and you pick it up with your fingers and it releases the lock to prevent children from going into a pool area that don't know how to swim and they drown. And then there's drama. Well, this says, no, that's not good enough anymore. I want to have either a mechanical lock or an electronic fob access into that pool area. So now that requires either a hardcore lock or electricity to operate the fob. So here's an example where the old style school, where you had the thumb latch, you had your warning signage and your fencing, whatever, but this is no longer allowed by the new House bill, which theoretically overrides the Florida Building Code, except it's never quite been addressed clearly. What if you already have this? Then you have to remove it and then put in essentially the new fob or mechanical key, which would look something like this. Now, the good news about this is notice the screening along here that prevents you from reaching through and getting the push bar, and the width of these security bars here, again, are narrow enough that I can't either reach over or reach through to grab the lock or the handle or the push bar. And you see the fob access control device there. When it's done poorly, like at this particular pool, all right, so I've got the bars and I've got my fob access control lock, but this isn't going to stop a teenager for a second, because all they're going to do is reach over and hit the push bar, and now they're in the pool. So we need to be mindful, like that earlier picture showing you that it needs to be low enough and have screening to prevent people from reaching through. But now we're having access control is required for these locks that was never a design consideration. So if there's a pool, we now need to think about access control for that pool entrance or exit. Now, as you're starting to move into choosing mitigation options, now the second part of this law kicks into effect, which is all the things that were not covered in the 7 required items of the video cameras, the minimum lighting requirements for open parking lots, the deadbolt lock, the lock on the pool gate, the locks on the windows, the locks on the sliding glass doors. Now they still want a CPTED professional analysis to cover all the rest of the things: hiding spots, wayfinding, common area space lighting, landscaping and planting requirements, other video surveillance that might be required in high impact areas like the laundry rooms or the management office. All the other unfinished business falls under the CPTED study that is put in as security options that's above and beyond the 7 minimum required items. CPTED, of course, is that through the proper design and use of the built environment, you can reduce the opportunity and fear of crime, of stranger predatory type crime. and as a result, improve the quality of life where we live, work, and play, and reduce the fear of crime so people aren't fearful of where they're living or working or playing, that you can walk your dog in the park, that you can go out jogging without fear of assaulted, that you can get your bags or groceries out of the car without someone jumping you. You want to be able to have the experience where you're not living in fear. And CPTED covers the basic areas. Most of you have heard me talk about CPTED or will in the future. Covers natural surveillance, and that's in architectural terms are glazing and doors. Natural access control. Is it clear where the front door is? Is it clear where the entrances are to the site and to the buildings? Territorial reinforcement or boundary definition. Our gates, our fences, the waterways, rocks, plantings, trees, bushes, all the things that define that from public property to private owned property of the apartment complex. Management practices and maintenance practices, the people component, the organizational aspects of CPTED, which is good property management, good maintenance practices, security roving patrols. And finally, legitimate activity support, that we have people involved and participate in their community so there's a sense of community so that they do watch their neighbors' homes, they do watch what's happening in the parking lot, they do watch the kids play, and if they see inappropriate activity or gangs or illegal activity, drug activity, sex trafficking, whatever it might be, that they report to management or law enforcement. While I have about, 5-6 minutes here, I want to sort of recap what we've covered here and the consequences of this very poorly written law that now goes into effect in 2 months, that in my opinion, as both an architect and criminologist, severely, it has an impact on how we design our multifamily housing properties. One of the things that this law doesn't cover is, it just says multifamily housing, like apartment buildings, but that also includes condominiums. What it doesn't say is, well, does that include hotels and motels? I mean, they're multifamily housing, and a lot of times the hotels will have, rentals for a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year. Doesn't talk about it. What about hospices and nursing homes? They're definitely residential housing. Doesn't talk about it at all. And most importantly, this law is so poorly written that there's no one to ask. There's no one to ask for a second opinion. Even the Florida Attorney General was never asked for their input. The Florida Institute of Crime Prevention, the Florida Crime Prevention suit under the Attorney General's Office of Florida was never asked for input. I was never asked for input. And even when I lobbied for a solid year with the Florida Apartment Association and Florida AIA to fix the glitches, I didn't even get the courtesy of a response from these legislators. So we're on our own. It's the best kept secret. Nobody knows about it. It goes into effect in 2 months, and everyone's scratching their heads going, WTF, what am I supposed to do with this? So we take a deep breath. We now know that we have basic security requirements. This presentation is available to you so that you can, capture some of the items. Of course, I live in Fort Lauderdale, and I'm available to any of the architects that need a second opinion. I'm happy to answer a phone call and provide some guidance. I'm getting hundreds of calls from apartment buildings. I mean, there are tens of thousands of apartment buildings, and 99.9% of them don't even know about this yet. And the 0.00001% that is, I'm swamped and overbooked doing these apartment surveys. I'm not even taking on new projects until April of next year. I mean, it's out of control because there's only a few people out there that have gone through the training that are certified who can conduct these studies. And the police departments don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. The liability, first of all, it takes, a week to write up the report and a day or two in the field to do these studies. And secondly, there's liability if I miss something or I'm, overlook something, and they're saying they want every single window, sliding glass door, door lock, and peephole looked at and checked at. If I'm dealing with a 300-400 unit apartment complex, they want every single door, window, and lock looked at. Really, I mean, it's just shocking and stunning. So this is sort of troubling on many different levels. From the architecture aspect, if we know what we have to do, we walk through the minefield and we make sure we specify the deadbolt locks and the strike plate with 3-inch screws or 1-inch screws if it's a hollow metal door frame. we have to have a conversation with our lighting engineer, make sure you comply with the state law, and let the lighting engineer figure it out what has to be done on their photometric plan to make sure there's a minimum average of 1.8 foot candles. In garage world, it's now national standards of care under the Illumination Engineering Society G-1-22 lighting, security lighting guidelines. We already designed hardware on our sliding glass doors and windows that are latch or lock, but I'm just putting out there, for your mind's eye, make sure we put in a ventilation lock so we can open up the door 4 inches to let some fresh air in. Finally, the pool, again, conflicts with Florida building code that requires the lifting latch. Now swipe to the left, we got to put in access control into pool. Video surveillance systems, it's unclear what the entrances and exits are. And the best advice I can give you is that if I have a site with a single high-rise tower and there's fencing around the property, then I would want a camera coming onto and out of the site. And if I have a lobby foyer with an elevator going up, then I need a camera there because that's my entrance and exit point. On the other hand, if I have a site that has, 20, 30, 50, 2-story, 3-story walk-up townhouses, no, I'm not, and everyone's walking into their front door off the street. No, I don't need cameras at every single front door. I need video surveillance at the entrance and exit to the property, the site, and hopefully we have a perimeter fence so that it's, 1 or 2 ways in or out. And that's where I fortify with fencing, gating, video surveillance, and access control, gate arms and things of that nature. So the goal here is the accountability of who's coming and going on the property, the ability to account for who's coming on going on the property so that hopefully reduce the opportunity and fear of crime in multifamily housing. I've got a couple minutes to take questions, and I'm going to stop the share. So let's see, how do I do that? And I'm back. Okay.
Hey,
Wendy,
Randy. Yes. So you have, looks like 21 questions. I would start, if you want to go to the beginning, look at around 1033 with Gregory Randall, I think is where they started.
Well, actually, I see Greg Randall. Does this law apply to all multifamily units? Are there yes, thank you for reminding me. One of the earlier slides show with a minimum of 5 or more units, this law applies to. So if you have a single duplex, triplex, not a problem. But if you have 5 or more units, this applies. Does the law apply to short-term condominium properties that are similar to apartment buildings? I'm going to say yes, because again, we don't control. Remember, this is very similar to like what happened with ADA. I mean, it was just chaos and mayhem. When ADA passed in 90 and we had till 92 to get it implemented. And now here we are 35 years later and people are still getting sued for ADA violations. And we looked upon our ADAG as our architectural guide of how to do this. And we're still, scratching our head every time, other than I see Larry Schneider coming up. Larry designed our Florida bathroom, so we all know about the Larry Schneider Florida ADA compliant bathroom and parking space. But for example, the question here is short-term rental condominiums, because yes, if it's 5 or more units, people are coming and going. It doesn't matter who's living there permanently, or 6-month rent or 1-month rent or 10-year renting or owning. You have to have the access control, this video surveillance, the locking devices, as we talked about. Larry asked about what about existing properties? No, this is retroactive. I know, I can hear the screaming in your head. This is retroactive and absolutely for new properties. Next one, is there a specified number of units? Yes, we talked about it 5. What about condominiums? Yes, it includes condominiums, and especially because condominiums, if it's 5 or more units, are multifamily housing, and whether it's rental or ownership, it doesn't matter. In fact, I went to a property a couple weeks ago that was both rentals and condos, and especially condo owners rent their units. So the answer is yes, it applies. Condo hotels, I don't know. It's not clear in the law. I'm going to go on the side that says most likely yes. Did the state identify requirements for qualifications the folks intend to review? Yes. The answer is You have to go only to the Florida Attorney General's Crime Prevention Institute. Now, imagine the irony that I have literally written the book on this in 2008 and second edition in 2013. I've been training people in CPTED since 1984, 40 years. And I had to go back and take the basic training because they didn't even recognize my certification. And I am like the president of the United States chapter of the International CPTED Association. They didn't qualify that. They don't even honor the National Institute of Crime Prevention and their people. So it's a monopoly. It's the Florida Attorney General's Crime Prevention Institute is the only certification that qualifies people, or the exception to the rule is law enforcement agencies. But I just came back teaching from the Florida Crime Prevention Association, which were a room full of police officers. And believe me, none of them want to touch us with a 10-foot pole. They don't have the time to go do the surveys. You know, they got 45 minutes or an hour. It takes me anywhere from 1 to 2 days on site. It takes me 6 to 8 hours just to do the measuring. I got to measure every single parking space on an open parking lot for 1.8-foot candles. No exceptions. I mean, it's staggering on this. Okay, next one, Michael Clough. Does the new apply to condominium? Yes. Next one, Carlos. Are they saying that this is the designer of record's responsibility? No. But if we're dealing with a renovation or a restoration or a new set of plans, and you don't include these items, there's only two excuses. One, that you've been mandated or ordered by the property owner or manager not to do it, in which case you need to have a paper trail, the CYA trail, so that you say, I need to comply, because this is like Florida building code. It's not building code, but it's state law. So you've got to comply with it. And so my opinion is the architect does have responsibility for new properties to include these features in. Are they saying that this is, we talked about that. Is there a lighting level recommendation that meets both CPTED and LEED? Great question. I don't know is the correct answer. However, what I'm going to suggest, because I know I have a whole chapter in my book about LEED, mean, and green, which is what is the impact of CPTED on the LEED and energy efficiency world. And I'm going to suggest that the 1.8-foot candles at 18 inches above the ground means it's going to be a really bright light. And they don't make any reasonable accommodations for it being LED lights, which produces a much better quality of lighting on the ground level with much less wattage than a high pressure sodium or a mercury vapor lamp. So at this point, I would submit the Randyism of complaining is pretending you have a choice because you've got to have the 1.8-foot candles 18 inches above the ground for an open parking lot. Garage.
Hey, Randy, you're frozen on my side.
Problem. Now, in the common area spaces where you're dealing with the Illumination Engineering Society requirements, they have the bug rating, backlight, uplight, and glare. But when it comes to the open parking lots, crickets, nothing is mentioned. Too much light produces glare. How do we avoid this and still be safe? And that is the practice safe lighting, meaning we need to have our enclosures around the lighting so that the lighting is directed down and not up as sky glow or light trespass or light pollution. Many zoning code requirements limit light spill or light trespass. How to address this? Again, this is where we read the Riot Act to the lighting engineer to make sure we have cutoffs, that we have, it meets the bug ratings and still has enough lighting at 18 inches above the ground, 1.8-foot candles. Does the light specify video performance requirements? No. And this is a problem, so it's up to the security consultant / CPTED person to say, gee, this would be a great place for a license plate reader, or we need to have video surveillance on the intercom system so I can see a person's face when they, hello, I'm here to visit you. So no, it does not specify performance requirements. That would be a industry standard developed by your security consultant or security systems integrator? Can you recommend a reference or book that covers this information? Will the audio be made available? Yes, the audio will be made available, and Wendy will verify when to get that. You have a copy of the presentation. And of course, my book covers all the basics about architecture and CPTED. It was written, 10 years before this law passed, but it probably, other than the 1.8 foot candles, it covers pretty much everything else. And that's called 21st Century Security and CPTED. And when I get back to that last slide, I think it has a picture of that. Do the requirements supersede the established requirements of the Florida Building Code? I'm going to say a qualified yes, because this is March of 23, and it supersedes everything else until the courts fight it out. The law requires security for multifamily housing and condos. Is this not required for hotels? Unclear. It doesn't state. Carlos wrote here a 52-inch self-locking, self-latching, and I believe it's a federal pool safety requirement. Yes. And now we're dealing with how does federal and industry standards wrestle with the state law, which requires, it doesn't specify how high it is, but now it's saying it has to be a mechanical key or fob or access control, which still, with a door closer, is self-locking and self-latching. The difference is that it's not wanting the pull tab that we've been familiar with. Are duplexes and triplexes considered multifamily? Yes, but not unless there's more than 5 units in that property. You don't have to make these security recommendations. Yes, it applies to condos, Gary. What is the Charlie bar you have shown, and what does it do from a security standpoint? Okay, great. So you're familiar with sliding glass doors, and the Charlie bar goes through the moving door part so that you can't move the door and you can't lift it off the track because of the 4-inch water threshold. So the Charlie bar prevents you from forced entry or burglary by just sort of lifting the sliding glass door off the track and moving it out and then breaking in. Does this apply to new existing buildings? Yes. Jim writes, rearding motion sensors in laundry rooms. Is there a problem with being on timers with the lights going out? Many of us, myself included, have been in the toilet stall with a motion sensor activated light, and all of a sudden, boom, the lights power down, and then there's drama and screaming, and you have to get off the toilet and wave your hands around for the light to go back on. So it's a great question. It probably needs to have some kind of timer. If there's someone in the laundry room, there's going to be enough motion. If it's a bathroom, we've all had that experience where the light sensor can't see you in the stall and it goes out. So we need to give some more thought to that. Does it apply to standalone homes that are part of a condo? No. When is your next class for CPTED course for certification? I teach a course every college semester. The next one will be in January. And it's a 40-hour course, and you get certification from the International CPTED Association, and it's at my website, cpted-security.com. The challenge here, though, is that even my own certification and my own qualifications and credentials, which is the highest in the entire universe, including, the Star Trek universe, doesn't qualify you to go do these assessments. So yes, my training is much better than what you can get elsewhere, but you need the Florida CPTED practitioner certification from the AG's office. Believe me when I tell you, no architect wants to go through that training and do these assessments. It is a miserable experience to be out at night, 6-8 hours in dangerous neighborhoods, bending over, doing 18-inch lighting readings. You have to go to a chiropractor the next day.
Hey, Randy. Hey,
Yes, ma'am.
sorry to interrupt, but our presentation, next one actually is supposed to start right now. So
Okay.
what we can do
Right.
is you can go to the backstage and continue to answer these questions by typing them in, or we can send them to you and you can answer them, and we could post those on our website later.
And I think all these other questions I'm looking, the last one I want to answer here is about turtle lighting exemption. Turtle lighting is federal and state. And so you still have to have 1.8 foot candles, but it just has to be the yellow bug lighting for turtles. Other than that, I think I answered everything
Okay.
Can this law be vetoed or overruled? Only by the courts, and we'll see how that happens with whatever new administration comes in. Well, I want to again thank everyone for coming today.